Have you ever felt that there's something much greater standing behind you? What if I told you there is a celestial presence at your side, watching every step you take, trying desperately to communicate through dreams, intuitions, and signs you may never have noticed? What would happen if you finally listened to that voice? What if your entire story, every inexplicable coincidence, every choice that changed your destiny were, in fact, messages from this secret being, waiting for you to awaken? This video, I'm going to guide you on a journey of self-knowledge, and you're going to be surprised, because certain teachings have been accessible only to a few initiates throughout history, people who achieved great accomplishments in their spiritual purposes on Earth. You're going to discover this now, layer by layer, from the earliest of our ancestors to modern times, considered essential knowledge by the most influential magicians in history, such as Aleister Crowley, Cornelius Agrippa, Franz Bardon, Giordano Bruno, Eliphas Levi, among several other writers on the subject, knowledge that transcends dogmas and beliefs. I'm Gabriel Alexandre, and this is our point of connection, the Esoterica Mind Portal. This isn't just a channel, it's a movement of people who, like you, feel we're here to make a difference. To officially join us and never miss a step in our collective journey, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. What we're building together goes far beyond simple videos. Every like from you is a vote of confidence that propels our message farther and farther. And when you share, you're actively expanding our circle and bringing more souls into this same frequency of light. This channel is yours too, so I want you to choose the topics for our next videos. Drop a comment below with what you want to see next. The comment with the most likes will get a dedicated video on that topic. The ancient sages said, "O man, know thyself, and you will know the gods and the universe." To better understand this mystery of the sacred guardian angel, let's start thousands of years ago, with the earliest records of spiritual practices in history, in the Paleolithic period, when our ancestors developed the first practices we now call shamanic or animistic. At that time, the tribe's shaman was that special individual who had the ability to enter altered states of consciousness and invoke spirits into himself. These spirits were not seen as evil entities, but rather as spiritual guides who protected and guided the entire community. The shaman became a channel, an intermediary between the world of spirits and the world of men, and through him, these spiritual beings could transmit wisdom, healing, and protection. As the millennia passed, this practice evolved. Protective spirits began to be associated with totem animals: the bear that protected hunters, the eagle that guided travelers, the wolf that taught about life in community. Later, these spirits were identified with the tribe's ancestors, those who had already departed but still kept watch over their descendants. This primordial idea of a spiritual being that accompanies and protects us is the seed of what would become the concept of the sacred guardian angel. Have you ever felt as if nature were trying to communicate? Our ancestors felt it all the time. Among the Sumerians, organized religion was already fully structured around 3100–2900 BCE, although there are accounts pointing to even earlier origins. They believed that each person was accompanied by a Lamassu or Shedu, hybrid beings of human, animal, and divine form, who acted as invisible guardians. These figures were not merely architectural symbols at city gates, but expressed the belief that spiritual forces were always by people's side, protecting them from chaos and guiding their earthly journeys, concepts very similar to the guardian angel in Christianity, or the sacred guardian angel of high magic. In ancient Egypt, contact with the invisible was everyday life. Each person was accompanied by spiritual forces such as the Ka-Ba-Akh that protected and connected them to the divine. Priests sought direct communion with these presences in temples, receiving messages through dreams, visions, and signs in nature. This tradition of dialogue with higher intelligences later inspired Hermetic magic and the concepts of personal spiritual guides. In ancient Egypt, the relationship with the invisible was part of daily life. The Egyptians believed that each person was accompanied by spiritual forces, such as the Ka, the Ba, and the Akh, that protected, inspired, and linked the individual to the world of the gods. Great priests sought, in sacred temples, direct communion with these beings, receiving messages through dreams, visions, and signs in nature. This millennia-old tradition of communicating with higher intelligences laid the foundations for what would, centuries later, be called Hermetic magic and would inspire the birth of new concepts of personal spiritual guides. In ancient Rome, the idea of a personal protective spirit was part of everyday life. It was the genius for men and the Juno for women. These spirits were seen as real presences that guided decisions, protected families, and gave vitality to life. There were even household altars where rituals and celebrations were offered, especially on birthdays and important occasions. Emperors had their own Genius Augusti, publicly, venerated as symbols of their sacred authority. Moving forward in time, we reach the Hellenistic period, when Hermetic knowledge from Egypt met Greek philosophy, creating an extraordinary synthesis that would forever change Western esoteric thought. The Greek magical papyri, those fascinating documents that survived the ages, reveal a specific practice, the invocation of the Paredros. The Paredros was much more than a simple protective spirit. It was a personal deity, a divine being that watched over the practitioner, offering not only protection, but also occult knowledge and magical power. These Hermetic papyri represent a crucial evolution in the concept. We are no longer talking about tribal spirits or ancestors, but individualized divine entities designated specifically for each person. The rituals described in these papyri are complex and elaborate, involving purifications, fasts, invocations in sacred tongues, and the use of specific magical symbols. The practitioner sought to establish an intimate and permanent relationship with his Paredros, turning it into a constant ally on his spiritual journey. At the same time, the pre-Socratic philosophers and, later, Plato and his followers developed the concept of daimons. It's essential to understand that the term daimon in the Greek context has absolutely no relation to the later Christian idea of a demon. The daimons were intermediaries between the gods and higher intelligences that served as messengers and guides. Socrates, the great philosopher, spoke openly about his personal daimon, an inner voice that warned him when he was about to make a mistake, but that, curiously, never told him what to do, only what not to do. This Socratic conception is revolutionary because, for the first time, we have a detailed and philosophical account of how this guiding entity manifests in daily life. Socrates' daimon did not appear in spectacular visions or through elaborate rituals, but as a subtle voice, a deep intuition that arose at crucial moments. Plato expanded this idea, suggesting that every human soul has its own daimon, designated even before birth, that accompanies and guides it throughout its earthly journey. Neoplatonism, especially through figures like Plotinus, Iamblichus, and Proclus, elevated this concept even further. For the Neoplatonists, the universe was a complex hierarchy of beings, from the absolute one to the densest matter, and the daimons occupied a crucial place in this chain of being. They were the natural mediators between the divine and the human, and establishing contact with one's own daimon was considered essential for spiritual ascent. Neoplatonic Theurgy, the art of working with the gods, developed sophisticated rituals to invoke and converse with these entities. Iamblichus, a Neoplatonic writer in De Mysteriis, describes that each initiate has a personal daimon, responsible for his spiritual ascent. It is at this point that the history of the sacred guardian angel crosses a true crossroads of spiritual traditions. The end of the pagan philosophical schools, far from extinguishing the torch of Neoplatonism, scattered its embers across multiple fertile soils, where ideas about spiritual mediators, daimons, intermediate intelligences, and divine guides would be transformed and refined. In the fabric of Gnosticism, the longing for direct experience of the divine mingles with belief in intermediate spiritual beings, who lead the soul through the many veils of the cosmos. Among the Gnostics, we find the figure of the instructing angel, the luminous guide who reveals mysteries and protects the divine spark slumbering within the human being, an ancestral archetype of the sacred guardian angel. As Platonic, Gnostic, and Hermetic currents intertwine with mystical Judaism, especially through coexistence and intellectual dialogue in the cultural centers of the medieval Islamic world, this concept of the supreme spiritual guide takes on new contours. In Kabbalistic texts, especially among the medieval Kabbalists of the Iberian Peninsula and Provence, the tradition of the Maggid emerges, the angelic master who instructs, guides, and reveals mystical secrets to the worthy seeker, functioning as a kind of Kabbalah's sacred guardian angel. By direct influence of Neoplatonism and Hermetism, preserved and expanded in the Islamic world, the Kabbalists began to describe not just an abstract hierarchy of emanations, but a living, dynamic, personal relationship between the initiate and his spiritual guide. This angel is not just a philosophical concept, but a living presence with whom the magician, the Kabbalist, or the mystic can aspire to communion and direct dialogue. Thus, the notion of the sacred guardian angel, which had previously manifested as daimon, paredros, or visionary guide, is alchemized and transmitted into the heart of Hermetic Kabbalah. And it is in this crucible of spiritual syncretism where gnosis, theurgy, and mystical contemplation converge that the sacred guardian angel re-emerges, ready to be rediscovered by the magicians of the Renaissance and the great initiatory schools of modernity. In Kabbalah, we find concepts such as the Maggid, or inner genius, the celestial preacher who reveals mystical secrets to the worthy, and the idea that each person has a unique spiritual root, a divine spark that connects them directly with Ein Sof, the infinite. When Kabbalistic knowledge began to be transmitted to Christians during the Renaissance, masters like Giovanni Pico della Mirandola and Marsilio Ficino, among others, gave shape to what we know as Hermetic Kabbalah, in which the spiritual guardian is not just a philosophical metaphor, but a real presence whose communion is seen as the pinnacle of the magical path. Mystical Christianity, in turn, incorporates this concept in the figure of the guardian angel, the one who, according to ancient prayers, is at our side from birth, guiding us by the invisible hand. And here we come to one of the most influential texts in the entire Western magical tradition, the Book of Abramelin, the Mage. This grimoire, supposedly written by Abraham of Worms, possibly a literary character between the 14th and 15th centuries, but likely dating from the early 17th century, represents a fundamental milestone in our story. The book is structured as a narrative in 3 parts. The first tells the story of Abraham, a German Jew who traveled the world in search of true magical knowledge, meeting masters and charlatans until he finally found Abramelin, a wise Egyptian who lived as a hermit near the Nile. The second part of the book contains Abramelin's practical teachings, including the famous 6-month ritual to attain knowledge and conversation with the sacred guardian angel. This ritual is extraordinarily demanding. The practitioner must withdraw from the world, maintain absolute purity of body and mind, perform specific prayers 3 times a day, and gradually increase the intensity of his practices until culminating in the visible manifestation of the angel. The third part contains the famous magical squares, the kamias, which can only be used safely after success in the main operation. What makes Abramelin's system so special is its absolute emphasis on the sacred guardian angel as the primary goal and prerequisite for all true magic. According to the text, it is impossible to safely command spirits and carry out complex magical operations without first establishing this divine contact. The angel is not merely a protector, but the essential intermediary between the magician and all other spiritual forces. I personally think this ritual is extreme, unworkable, and unnecessary today. In my view, the sacred guardian angel does not depend on rigid rituals, dogmas, or anyone. Each human being has a formula to connect with their sacred guardian angel. As you can see, there are many practices from various traditions and different times that resonate with each other. In my opinion, it's up to the seeker to study and practice and little by little understand and connect with their sacred guardian angel. Now I'm going to speak briefly about other traditions and symbolic relationships between them and the sacred guardian angel. In esoteric Buddhism, especially in the Vajrayana traditions of Tibet, the sacred guardian angel finds a parallel in the Yidam, a personal deity chosen or revealed to the practitioner as a reflection of his enlightened nature. This being is not seen as external in the dualistic sense, but as a pure expression of the practitioner's own awakened mind. By meditating while visualizing the Yidam, be it Avalokiteshvara, Tara, Vajrapani, or others, the practitioner seeks to merge his consciousness with that of the deity, dissolving the ego and realizing union with his higher essence. The Yidam, like the sacred guardian angel, acts as guide, protector, and revealer of paths, leading the adept to enlightenment through practices that include mantras, visualizations, and deeply symbolic rituals. In Theosophy, a spiritual movement from the late 19th century influenced by Eastern, esoteric, and Christian traditions, the sacred guardian angel is often understood as the higher self or divine self, an individual spiritual reality that exists beyond the incarnate personality. Helena Blavatsky and Annie Besant spoke of a higher triad, Atma Buddhi Manas, as the true identity of the human being, with conscious contact with this higher part, being equivalent to communion with the guardian angel. Theosophy also recognizes the presence of spiritual masters, the Mahatmas, who silently guide humanity. Although distinct from the personal guardian angel, these masters reflect the same archetype of celestial guides whose mission is to lead evolving souls. The bridge between the lower ego and this higher self is seen as the great goal of the initiatory path. In Sufism, the mystical tradition of Islam, we find the concept of Al-Insan al-Kamil, the perfect man, which represents the divinely realized state of the human soul. This archetype is also perceived as the inner guide who directs the seeker along the spiritual path, described as a luminous presence that leads the heart toward the beloved divine. Sufi masters like Ibn Arabi describe this guide as simultaneously internal and transcendent, a manifestation of the true self awakening from the sleep of separation. Spiritual alchemy. The sacred guardian angel can be compared to the inner spirit, the philosopher's gold of the soul, or the alchemical sulfur, that divine spark that must be purified, awakened, and integrated for the process of inner transmutation to be complete. Many alchemists saw the alchemical path not merely as the transformation of external substances, but as a deep journey of self-knowledge and reconnection with the higher self. In this sense, the guardian angel is the very awakened consciousness that guides the alchemist through the labyrinth of matter to union with spirit. He represents the point of balance between opposites mercury and sulfur, body and soul, earth and heaven, and is the one who, once recognized, reveals the secret of true spiritual immortality. In Hinduism, we find a similar idea in the concept of the Atman, the inner divine self, and the tutelary devas, spiritual entities associated with certain aspects of karma and protection. Texts like the Bhagavad Gita speak of the divine companion within, the one who dwells in the heart of all beings and guides the soul invisibly, even if silently. Krishna, in dialogue with Arjuna, embodies this principle, a divine voice that awakens the highest consciousness and leads the being toward its dharma. This guiding presence, which can be felt as an inner voice or as a transcendental energy that inspires and protects, aligns deeply with the function of the sacred guardian angel. In Taoism, the idea of a guardian spirit connects with the concept of Shen, the spirits that inhabit and govern the subtle aspects of the body and consciousness. The Tao Te Ching reminds us that he who knows others is wise, but he who knows himself is enlightened, a maxim that echoes the journey of self-knowledge through contact with the guardian angel. It's important to stress that these parallels are symbolic and meant to highlight similarities of function and meaning among distinct traditions. Each has its own cosmologies, practices, and spiritual languages. And the intent here is not to equate concepts, but to show that many cultures share the intuition that there is a spiritual presence that accompanies, guides, and protects the human being on life's journey. And had you ever stopped to think about all this? Did you already know these traditions? Tell me in the comments your opinion matters to me. This view of the sacred guardian angel as an external entity, an angel literally designated by God to guide and protect each individual dominated Western magical thought for centuries. Medieval and Renaissance grimoires are filled with references to this concept, and the idea interwove deeply with Christian angelology. It was a time when the objective reality of angels was accepted without question, and the possibility of direct communication with these beings was considered not only possible, but desirable for spiritual growth. All these traditions converge on the idea that there is a divine, personal guiding aspect that acts as a bridge between the human and the transcendent, whether that bridge is an angel, a daimon, a higher self, or an embodied cosmic consciousness. But our story takes another fascinating turn with the rise of modern magical orders at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded in 1888, incorporated the concept of the sacred guardian angel into its initiatory system, but began to interpret it in new and controversial ways. Figures like MacGregor Mathers maintained the traditional interpretation of an external entity, but other members began to question this view. Aleister Crowley, perhaps the most controversial and influential figure in modern magic, devoted much of his life to the pursuit of knowledge and conversation with his sacred guardian angel, whom, at a certain point, he came to identify with Aiwass, the entity that dictated the Book of the Law to him in 1904. In 1909, Crowley published Liebe Samik, an adaptation of the Bornless Ritual, originally part of the Golden Dawn system, combining it with Enochian elements and his own innovations. What makes his approach particularly interesting is the ambiguity surrounding the nature of the angel. Early in his magical career, Crowley tended to interpret the sacred guardian angel in psychological terms as a manifestation of the higher self, the inner genius, or the Ogawides, according to ancient traditions. This reading was in tune with the zeitgeist of the time, when modern psychology was emerging as a scientific field, and concepts like the unconscious, archetypes, and personality integration began to influence even esoteric circles. However, especially after his mystical experiences in the Sahara Desert in 1909, Crowley began to assert categorically that Aiwass was an objective, preterhuman, autonomous intelligence, not merely a psychic fragment. However, he also wrote in Magic Without Tears, "It is the holy guardian, angel, who is the true link between the magician and his higher self. He is an individual being, but not separate from him. He is the one who has watched you from the beginning and who greets you when you come to the end." This tension between a psychological and a metaphysical view of the sacred guardian angel remains alive in the esoteric world to this day. On one side are the traditionalists, who maintain that the angel is a real entity, external to human consciousness, be it a literal angel, a cosmic intelligence, or even a being from a higher dimension. For them, reducing the angel to an internal symbol would be a dangerous desacralization that drains the transformative power from magical practice. On the other side are those who embrace a more psychological or archetypal approach, inspired by schools such as Jungian psychology. For them, the sacred guardian angel represents the self, the organizing center of the psyche, and magical ritual is a path of inner integration and the awakening of full consciousness. Between these two poles, many seek a synthesis, recognizing that the angel can be simultaneously internal and external, symbolic and real, psychological and spiritual. But there is a third way, a synthesis that may be more faithful to the phenomenon's complexity. What if the sacred guardian angel were simultaneously internal and external? What if it represented the meeting point between our individual consciousness and something greater? Imagine that our consciousness is not limited to the physical brain, but extends across dimensions we do not yet fully understand. In this view, the sacred guardian angel could be understood as our future self, a version of us that has already transcended the limitations of linear space-time, and can, therefore, guide us from a broader perspective. This interpretation finds resonance in various spiritual traditions. In Tibetan Buddhism, for example, we find the concept of the Yidam, the personal meditational deity, that is simultaneously a projection of the practitioner's enlightened mind and an objective presence in the cosmic mandala. In Sufism, we have the concept of the inner perfect man, the al-insan al-kamil, which represents our fully realized divine potential. What all these traditions seem to point to is that there is something deeply mysterious about the nature of consciousness and its relationship with the cosmos, the sacred guardian angel. Whatever its ultimate nature seems to represent a bridge between the personal and the transpersonal, between the human and the divine, between the temporal and the eternal. In contemporary practice, many magicians report that the experience of knowledge and conversation with the sacred guardian angel transcends any simple categorization. They describe encounters that have simultaneously the numinous quality of meeting the holy other and the deep intimacy of a reunion with the truest essence of themselves. It's as if, in that moment of mystical union, the distinction between internal and external, between I and other, simply ceases to make sense. The methods to achieve this contact have also evolved. Beyond the traditional rituals of Abramelin and the ceremonial invocations of the Golden Dawn and Crowley, we find today a variety of approaches. Some practitioners use meditation and visualization techniques derived from Eastern traditions. Others explore altered states of consciousness through practices like holotropic breathwork or the ritual use of entheogens. There are those who seek contact through art, dance, music, recognizing that the sacred guardian angel can communicate through any medium that resonates with the individual soul. A fascinating aspect that deserves our attention is how to recognize when we are in contact with our sacred guardian angel. Traditional texts speak of specific signs: a sense of undeniable presence, messages that arrive with crystalline clarity, synchronicities that multiply in extraordinary ways. But perhaps the most reliable sign is what the alchemists called drinkable gold, that quality of knowledge which, once received, permanently transforms our understanding and cannot be forgotten or denied. This communication does not always come through spectacular visions or audible voices. Often, the sacred guardian angel communicates through the subtle language of symbols, dreams, synchronicities, a book that falls open to a specific page, an unexpected encounter that changes the course of our life, a song that appears at the exact moment bringing the message we needed to hear. It's as if the angel works through the very fabric of reality, arranging events to gently guide us toward our highest destiny. Who knows? Maybe even this video could be your sacred guardian angel awakening you. But here a crucial question arises. If we all possess a sacred guardian angel, why do so few seem to be consciously in contact with it? Esoteric traditions suggest several reasons. First, the noise of modern life, the constant sensory and mental stimulation that prevents us from hearing subtle communications. Second, fear of the unknown, fear of the responsibility that comes with higher knowledge, fear of discovering that we are much more than our everyday personality allows us to believe. There is also the matter of preparation. Traditional texts insist that contact with the sacred guardian angel requires purification not in a moralistic sense, but in the sense of clearing the channels of communication. Just as a radio needs to be tuned to the right frequency to pick up a transmission, our consciousness needs to be refined and aligned to perceive the angel's subtle presence. The role of will is also fundamental. The sacred guardian angel, according to tradition, never violates our free will. He may inspire us, protect us from dangers we do not perceive, arrange synchronicities to guide us, but the final step of recognition and conscious acceptance must always come from us. It is a relationship that requires reciprocity, dedication, and above all, a genuine desire to know our true nature and purpose. As we advance into the 21st century, the concept of the sacred guardian angel continues to evolve. Some researchers of consciousness suggest that we are entering an era in which the veil between dimensions is becoming thinner, where more people are spontaneously experiencing contact with higher intelligences. Others see in the sacred guardian angel the fundamental archetype of the human psyche that is being collectively activated in response to the unprecedented challenges our species faces. Regardless of how we interpret its nature, whether as an external entity, a higher aspect of our own consciousness, or something that transcends this dichotomy, the sacred guardian angel remains one of the most powerful and transformative concepts in the entire esoteric tradition. It represents our connection with something greater than ourselves, our bridge to the divine, our guide through the mysteries of existence. The quest for the sacred guardian angel is an ancient trail, traced by countless spiritual traditions over time. In the beginning, we see this connection expressed through shamans who served as bridges between worlds, embodying protective spirits in rituals of healing and wisdom. Later, in Greece, there arose the personal daimons like Socrates' intermediate entities that guided human souls toward truth. Hermetism and Neoplatonic Theurgy, in turn, developed precise rituals to contact these higher intelligences, elevating the practice to the level of a dialogue with the divine. Mystical Kabbalah then brought figures such as the Maggid, the angelic master who delivers revelations directly to the initiate. In Christian Esotericism, this figure solidified as the guardian angel, but the concept was transformed more profoundly with the Book of Abramelin and the rise of initiatory orders like the Golden Dawn. In these schools, the guardian angel came to be understood as the magician's true inner guide and contact with him, the most important stage of the entire spiritual journey. Crowley, in Thelema, took this ideal even further, seeing in the angel the key to discovering the true will and the individual's cosmic purpose. Although his view oscillated between a psychological and a metaphysical interpretation, he ultimately argued with conviction that the angel was an autonomous, living entity, fundamental to spiritual realization. Today, this quest continues and diversifies even more. Some follow the ancient rituals faithfully. Others prefer modern approaches such as meditation, altered states of consciousness, lucid dreams, or cultivating symbolic sensitivity. Some see the angel as an external intelligence, others as a higher dimension of the self, or even as both. Regardless of the form, the essence remains. The sacred guardian angel is a link between the human and the divine, a presence that awaits the moment we decide to look within and beyond with true attention. The path is unique for each seeker, but all begin in the same place, with the sincere willingness to listen to the inner call. What we can say is that those who persist in this quest, who keep the flame of aspiration alive despite obstacles and doubts, invariably report that the encounter with the sacred guardian angel is the most significant event of their lives. It is the moment when they finally understand who they truly are, why they are here, and what the next step is in their evolutionary journey. Perhaps at this very moment, as we absorb these age-old ideas, our own sacred guardian angel is trying to communicate with us. Perhaps that intuition that arises, that synchronicity we notice, that vivid dream that marked us all, are fragments of a larger message that is constantly being transmitted, waiting only for us to tune our consciousness to the right frequency to receive it in its fullness. The search for the sacred guardian angel is not merely an arcane esoteric practice. It is the search for our true identity, for the deepest meaning of our existence, for connection with the cosmos of which we are an integral part. It is a journey that began with the Paleolithic shamans and continues to this day, always renewing itself, always revealing new facets of the fundamental mystery of what it means to be human and divine at the same time. May each of us find our own path to this sacred encounter, and may the wisdom of our guardian angels illuminate not only our individual lives, but also contribute to the elevation of humanity's collective consciousness. For, as the ancient masters taught us, when we establish conscious contact with our sacred guardian angel, we do not become merely accomplished magicians or mystics. We become truly ourselves, in all our glory and divine purpose. If this video touched something in you, make the most of that impulse. Reflect, study, observe the signs around you and within you. And above all, trust that this path is not solitary. There is a loving, profound, and silent intelligence that has walked with you from the beginning, waiting only for the moment when you decide to truly listen. If you like this content, leave your like, share it with those who are also on this quest, and subscribe to the channel to keep exploring topics like this. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had an experience that may have been with your sacred guardian angel? I read everything with great care. Save this video to a playlist to watch again later. Don't leave just yet. Click on our profile and check out other videos on our channel. I'm sure you'll enjoy them.